By the end of this video, you'll learn how to use Claude Cowork for B2B sales effectively. From running multi-agent outbound motions to automating on-brand personalized proposal decks, even if you have no idea how to code or have never used Claude before. Now, I spent years leading B2B sales teams and recently scaled a fast-growing SaaS startup from $0 to $3 million ARR in less than 18 months. So I understand exactly the pain points and challenges of a result-driven B2B sales team and how to implement automations that actually work in real life. This video is a no-nonsense step-by-step guide to build exactly that, with minimum tech jargon. It's meant to be a full zero to hero tutorial, assuming no prior knowledge to AI, coding, and LLM. The best way to learn, in my opinion, is to follow along the video and build. That way, by the end of it, you'll have a working Claude Cowork setup that automates 90% of your work. We'll cover how to set up Cowork and wire it up for prospecting, sales call prep, client research, coaching, CRM hygiene and reporting, and any other processes in sales that can be automated. Whether you're an SDR, AEs, managers, or in RevOps. We'll learn how to connect Claude with various important tools, add the right skills, and implement a robust knowledge base that makes Claude understand your product, your services, brand, as well as how your company works. Real quick, if you find tutorials like these useful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It does help a lot. So let's dive right in. Now, first off, in order to use Claude Cowork, you need to download the Claude desktop. So what you want to do is go over to claude.com/download, which I'll link down in the description below as well, and pick the system that is appropriate for you and essentially install it into your local system or your computer in order to use Claude Cowork. And once you have that installed, it's going to look something like this, right? So you will have, just open it up. So you would have on your top left-hand corner here, the chat, the Cowork, and code. All right, so you have access to the three. Of course, there are two things that you need in order to use Cowork, which is to have Claude Desktop downloaded on your computer, but also to have the Pro subscription. So as you can see, I have the Pro subscription over here. So right now it's $20 a month. So go ahead and subscribe to that. It's going to be one of the foundational subscriptions that you need to make everything work. Now, one of the questions that you're probably asking is, why are we using Claude Cowork and not code to set up the system? Well, the main reason for that is a learning curve. Claude Cowork is a much more intuitive and user-friendly way to get started on, because there's a sleek user interface between you and Claude. So what I mean by that is basically the tabs over here, the options over here that you can scroll around and you can type in your prompt. There's a neat little chat, and while you're working with it, it's actually going to show you a panel on the right-hand side for you to understand what kind of artifacts, what kind of docs that is already created in relation to that particular task. It is worth noting that Claude Cowork is built on top of the same architecture and functionality as Claude Code. So we're talking less intimidating learning curve and pretty much the same capabilities, with a few exceptions, of course. Claude Code is, to me, more suited for building product or apps that work closely with code bases, while operational processes such as sales, marketing, finance is often more intuitive to just work through Cowork. This also means that it's much easier to get your team to buy in and adopt, because not everyone is comfortable working on a terminal with Claude Code, right? Even if it's just prompting it with natural language, which is most of the times English. So that's the reason why for most business processes, to me, I would use Cowork instead of just Claude Code. So as mentioned earlier, you need the at least Claude Pro plan to get started with Cowork. And correction with what I said earlier, it's $17 if you pay annually, $20 if you pay monthly. But yeah, I'm paying monthly currently, so I'm paying $20 a month. But essentially, as you can see, it gives you Cowork, Claude Code, Claude Design, which are the stuff that we are going to use later on as part of the system that we're setting up. Now, once you subscribe to that and have your Claude desktop set up, you're going to be able to just spin up Cowork within your laptop or computer. So before we build the automations out, I think it's important to fully understand the activities that are pretty common with the B2B sales motion. So these are a couple of common processes that a B2B sales team will undertake. One is the prospecting, typically done by the SDRs or the sales development reps. And then there's pre-call, research, or prep. So this is when the prospect has actually confirmed that they want to jump on a discovery call with you. And that's typically taken up by an AE or an account executive. So, the AEs need to actually do research, deep research into the company, personalize the proposals, just get ready to go into the sales calls with the necessary information of that particular person that you're talking to, and also the company that they're working in and how your solution or product can fit into their current workflow. And then after that, of course, post the call, you may go into the stage of preparing decks and proposals, depending on the services and products that you're selling. And also, of course, to close the loop, and probably important for the sales managers, is to look at the call transcript, how the call went, whether it was good, bad, and provide coaching at the end of it, right? And then, of course, for RevOps and CRM hygiene and reporting and deal tracking is also important to make sure that deals are being tracked properly and you're able to make reporting and projections accurately. So starting with prospecting, so typically in prospecting, what you do is you find a list of prospects, right? So list of prospects, and this used to be the most time-consuming thing for a sales rep, is to come up with a list of prospects that are good, they're effective, but also to come up with the messaging for this list of prospects. So depending on how much personalization you want to do, of course, it gets crazier, but we're just going to say simply sequences of messaging. So what this is a string of emails spread across, let's say 14 or 21 days. And this could be more than emails, right? So typically you want to do multi-channel through LinkedIn, as well as doing calls as well into the prospect. So all of this now is going to be automated directly on Claude Cowork. It's going to get you the list of prospects. It's going to come up with the sequences and messaging, and then it's going to queue all of that up to your outbound engine. And why do I say engine? Because what happens is once you want to fire up the sequences and messaging, you'll face a limitation in terms of the inboxes and stuff like that. And what I mean by that is if you're doing things at scale, let's say you're outreaching to 1,000 contacts per month, then you're going to need more than one inbox, because one email address sending out 1,000 or a couple thousand emails out a month is going to erode your domain authority, and before long all your emails are going to fall into the spam box. So a typical good rule of thumb for one email inbox is to send about 25 to 35 emails per day. It also depends on whether the emails have been replied and stuff like that, because then the system kind of flags that as a healthy email behavior. So you need a robust outreach engine, which in this case, it's going to be automated by Lemlist, which is a tool that I'm using to automate this infrastructure. So you can actually buy secondary domain emails and even phone numbers and be able to just run your outreach campaign through Lemlist. And of course, this all are going to tie back into Claude Cowork. So this is the first part that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and build this part out, and then we'll move on to the pre-call research, decks, and so on and so forth. So the first thing you want to do on Claude Cowork is to connect it to the third-party tools that you're going to need in order to make all of this work, right? So I've mentioned earlier, Lemlist is one of the things that you need to get connected to. So what you can do is go to Customize, go to Connectors, and you can essentially add connectors right here. Right now, I already have Lemlist connected, but I'm going to just disconnect them. Actually, no, I'm just going to remove them completely and then reconnect them, so you'll be able to see how to connect them later on. So with most of the connectors, you can actually browse connectors and find, whether they exist. Like for example, Fireflies is one of the meeting recorder tools, right? It actually has an official connector by Anthropic, which makes it a lot easier. But for Lemlist, what you want to do is you're not going to be able to find the connectors over there. So what you want to do is add custom connector. In this case, I'm just going to type Lemlist into the connector, and the remote MCP server URL you can find under list.com/blog/how to set up Lemlist MCP. And there's a URL right here. Don't worry, I'm just going to copy this and put it down in the description below. But then you could take this URL, go back and just paste it over here. And that's it. You just want to do an add. And then this is going to open up a browser. Well, because I've authenticated before, I guess it's not asking me to do it. But if you're new, there will be a browser pop-up for you to authenticate into on Lemlist, so you can just go ahead and do that. Now, worth noting that Lemlist is a paid tool, of course, so you need to subscribe to it, at least on the base plan, for you to be able to use the functionalities and connect it to Claude. But on the Lemlist platform itself, you can actually do a lot of things, right? So you can run campaigns, you can create campaigns. But more than that is you can actually buy multiple email domains that you can start using pretty quickly within the hour, right? So what you do is go over to settings, and then under buy domains and emails, you're going to be able to search, the domain that you want. So in this case, let's say I have a dummy company called ledgerly.co, right? So I'm going to search this, and it's going to give me, some of the available domains that, I can buy, and then I can provision inboxes from that, right? So ledgerly.com, getledgerly.com, ledgerly.net. So it seems like the only available ones right now is getledgerly.net. So you can buy the domain $15 per year directly from Lemlist. And after that, then you can provision the emails through Lemlist as well. So now I'm not going to dive too deep into how to do everything on Lemlist, because I'm not sure if everyone's going to use Lemlist. Some of you may be using some existing solutions, so that's fine as well. But I just want to give you a good idea on how everything kind of connects together. All right, and of course you can buy phone numbers now through calls, as well as connect your LinkedIn to Lemlist so that it can do the multi-channel outreach for you through emails, LinkedIn, and calls. But calls obviously need to be done manually at this point. It has some pretty cool reports that you can look at, deliverability and stuff like that, because this is a dummy account. You don't have a lot of content or a lot of data in it. So one last thing also, obviously, it integrates with a lot of CRMs and, of course, Claude itself and Slack if you wanted to deliver messages on Slack, etc. But yeah, Now that we have Lemlist connected, and by the way, on some versions, I've seen that this particular function for Cowork on desktop has been moved over here instead of right at the top left-hand corner. So if you see that it's not there, it's probably just right down here that you could toggle between chat and Cowork. So once you have Lemlist connected, technically you can run the data enrichment directly on Lemlist. So that's the reason why I'm not connecting another one like Apollo. But if you do want to connect Apollo or any other connectors, what you can do is, again, go to Browse Connectors, and I think Apollo has an official one. Yeah, there you go. So you can just add it in, and it's a similar case. Once you click on it, it's going to have a browser pop-up for you to authenticate into your Apollo. So just make sure that what you're using to register, the email address that you're using to register to Apollo or Lemlist or any tools is the same email address as the ones that you are using for Claude Cowork. So sometimes the mismatch in the email address often gives you some challenges in terms of connecting these. So that's totally optional because now Lemlist can actually do the prospecting for you. So beyond connectors, you'll see that there are two other things here, such as skills and plugins, right? So what are these things? So skills are basically a recipe on how you want Cowork to do certain tasks. So you can invoke skills by just typing in the / command. And you've got a bunch of skills here. And what they mean is, for example, Apollo B2B prospecting. This is just a guideline telling Claude like how Apollo works, the architecture within Cowork, the architecture within Apollo, and how to best enrich it for credit efficiency, etc. So I mentioned the past skills are basically just like recipes. So for example, if you want to cook a plate of carbonara, you probably tell it you want this amount of pasta, this amount of eggs, etc. to make the plate of carbonara that you like, right? So it doesn't have to figure out how to cook a plate of carbonara every single time from scratch. So that's basically what it is. And it's just a text file, right? You go to customize and go under skills. So we were talking Apollo B2B prospecting. So I'm going to open that up. As you can see, these are all just text, right? So this is just telling Claude, hey, this is a tool to search Apollo's database for net new people. Prospects does not return emails. Use enrich after, so that Claude knows this particular command is not going to give any emails, so that it doesn't have to, again, figure it out from scratch, right? So these are all just kind of guidelines, so what to do, best practice, stuff like that. So that's all there is to skills. You can create your own skills with Claude if you want. So for example, if you run your B2B sales outreach for a week or two, and you now have figured out what's the best way to do it, and you want it to create the skills, you can just tell it to do that, and it will just create the skills, and you'll be able to use that. And lastly, plugins is basically just a combination of the two, right? A plugin is just a package of skills plus connectors. So for example, a small business plugin would include a bunch of skills, right? Business plus everything, and as well as some connectors. So that's all there is to it. It's nothing too complex. But here, what you want to do, if you're using this for sales, what I recommend to do is just go over to Browse here under plugins and look for sales, right? So there's a sales plugin over here, which has a bunch of skills, account research, call prep, call summary, competitive, and a bunch of connectors, Slack, HubSpot, Monday, Clay, Zoom Info, Atlassian. So let's just install that, right? Because some of these tools we're not using anyway, but you can install them, doesn't matter, you just don't connect them. Because installing a plugin doesn't mean that you are connected to all the tools, it's just giving you the skills and the connectors being listed over there. So now as you can see, if I go to the chat, now I can / call prep. Now I have that particular skill, downloaded from the plugin. So now I can access it and use it as part of what I'm asking it to do. So now we have the skills, the connectors wired up to our Claude Cowork. So what we want to do is really go over to the options over here on the left-hand corner. So this projects, which is really the bifurcation of the context that you want to give Cowork. So what it means is, let's say you are an abc.com sales team. So you want to create a project called abc.com sales team. And if you're in a marketing team, maybe you want to create a different project called marketing, so on and so forth. And if you're a service provider, maybe you have certain clients with a lot of documentations, information in the particular client file that you may want to create a project for that particular client. Say, for example, here, Solve Tumblr is a fictitious company or business that I created. So I've just created a whole bunch of stuff and essentially put it into the project. And the benefit of having it into the project is that Claude Cowork now has all of these files that are associated to Solve Tumblr as its context. So when I talk to it in this particular chat under the Solve Tumblr project, create a marketing campaign, it knows that it's supposed to create marketing campaigns for Solve Tumblr and not any other random marketing campaign. And also it will then take references accordingly from all the files over here to create the right marketing campaign for Solve Tumblr. So that's all it is to projects. So as much as possible, what I like to do is I like to keep the context within a specific project. So how do you create a new project effectively? If you already are running business, what you want to do is head over to new project over here. And here choose an existing folder, right? So we'll choose a folder directly from your laptop. So what I'm assuming here is that you have a folder. In this case, the fictitious company that we're gonna incorporate in this video or in this demo, it's called Ledgerly. So I kind of have Claude created a bunch of fake data and stuff like that, fake documents, etc. Just like how a running business would. Is pretty messy. There's some organization, but not truly organized. So that you can literally take the whole folder about your company, any past marketing campaigns, any past call scripts, any battle cards, etc. Put it in a folder and then point it to that particular folder. In this case, it's called the Ledgerly folder. And also just realized afterwards that Ledgerly is actually an interesting company after I've created all these fictitious data. But in this case, all the data is fictitious, nothing to do with the actual company, right? But okay, so here I'm gonna hit open on Ledgerly, right? So here, put Ledgerly demo, okay? And then I'm gonna create a project. Cool, so now here, in Ledgerly, you'll see, if you, on the right-hand side over here, you'll see under the Ledgerly folder, you'll see all the existing information and data that is associated with Ledgerly, which is in this case, a SaaS company that helps finance professionals and accounting folks, do their books and stuff like that. I don't really know too much about accounting, but yeah, it's just a SaaS tool that helps organize all of that. But in this case, yeah, these are all the assumed documents that the sales team have. Let's say the medic cheat sheet, objection handling, pricing, the existing sales process, and this is all markdown file at the moment, but it can be any type of files, right? It can be, Excel sheet, it can be PowerPoints, it can be text files, Word document, just put it in there. And essentially that becomes your foundational knowledge base that you can let Claude build on top of. Now there's one more step to this where if you want Claude to be really effective in fetching the right information, make it token efficient, make it really quick. Because if you think about it, right? Every time I ask Claude, hey, create a sales outreach campaign for 400 CFOs in the Bay Area. So let's say I go, hey, create sales outreach campaign for 100 CFOs in the Bay Area. What it does is it's going to try to get some context, obviously, from the existing stuff here, right? Like to understand what is Ledgerly, how do we sell it, what is the right messaging, how's the brand like, who are the ICPs, all of that stuff. If I were to send this prompt over, what it does is it's going to, because this is disorganized, it's going to go through and look through all the information here, all the files here in order to get the information that's possibly useful for it in order to complete this task. So that's going to take a lot of tokens and probably takes more time for it to do that. So what we want to do instead is actually first organize all these files in a neat directory, right? And then later on, give that directory or the index to Claude so that every time it's being asked to do a certain task, it first goes through the directory, which is the index, and then it understands like, okay, the battle cards are in this particular file, the objection handling is on the other file, messaging is on this particular folder over here, and it could just go directly to the folder and basically get what it needs from that folder. And there's a system for this called the Wiki LLM system, where it kind of builds linkage and backlinks between all these files. So for example, under pricing may have connection to, I don't know, maybe how the messaging should work, right, when it comes to pricing. So pricing actually has something to do with also messaging, or sales process may have something to do with pricing. So there's some connection here and there. So we just want to link basically sales process with pricing within the whole framework. So what we want to do here before we do anything is actually have this prompt ready. It's a long prompt and I'll paste it down in the description below as well. What this does is asking Claude to organize this whole folder. So I'm not going to read everything, but it's essentially asking, you're going to turn this folder of my sales files into connected knowledge base that use your long-term memory, and it's going to give it schema. It's going to ask to write the schema into the Claude.md file. So without getting into too much details, Claude.md is basically the file that Claude Cowork or Claude looks at every time you run a session before it does anything, right? So this is basically like the soul of Claude, right? In the sense that the Claude MD will tell it, hey, you are let's say, a sales automation assistant, etc. Here are the indexes for you to find useful information and all the stuff that you wanted to understand right from the start. So I'm going to run that and it's going to go through the folder. It's going to rearrange it. And by the end of it, you're going to have something like this, which is more of the brand, index, and if you open up the claudemd.md, which is a markdown file, which is again a text file, this is the file that Claude references every time it does a run. Say this is a sales knowledge base, this is a schema, this is the wiki, the titles, etc. And it's going to tell you all of that. So sorry, the index actually goes into a separate one called index.md. So let's take a look at what index.md is. And yeah, the index.md is basically, like I said, the directory of where to find the useful information. So this may seem pretty boring, we're just organizing files, but this absolutely helps Claude in terms of having a robust persistent memory and be able to effectively fetch the right memories as it's going through the task. Okay, so that run's going to take a little while and it's going to take up a lot of tokens. So I've actually pre-run that before, and what you have at the end of it is the project files that are more organized, as shown earlier. And if you want to take this one step further, what you can do is go to obsidian.md. So this is basically like a browser or a visualizer of how the files are all connected together, right? So what you can do is just download it to your computer and open it up. And once you open it up, what you want to do is go to your bottom left-hand corner over here under Obsidian Vault and go to Manage Vaults. And here you can open up any files or project folder and be able to then visualize it in note format, right? So here, what you want to do is open folder as Vault. And then what you want to pick is the Ledgerly folder. In this case, the reference build, which is I built out earlier. And what you have will look something like this, right? So it shows the connection of these files. So again, if you were to click on the files, it's going to show you what the text file is, right? And then if you want to look at a graph again, just open the graph view here on the left-hand corner, and you'll be able to see this. So first, of course, it looks cool, but what's the functionality of this, right? So actually, it's just a reflection of what you've built in terms of the connections, in terms of backlinking, and the way, let's say, for example, competitors map is linked to playbooks map. So if I were to click on that, you'll see that there are some links here, and which is how basically all of this nodes are linked together, is that Claude, because of the prompt that we put in earlier, is building logical links between the files. And the reason why you want these links is because it makes it easier for Claude in order to search any relevant information when talking about a particular subject, right? For example, we're talking about product map. We probably have corporate cards, persona map that would be relevant for it to add at least reference to, right? And furthermore, what you can see is there are a couple of orphan files out here, which you may have Claude actually build some linkage and make sure that is linked to the whole knowledge base. So you can do that by simply asking it, hey, I see a few orphan files, and could you make sure that everything is connected? And run a weekly lint of making sure that all the files are updated, connected properly, and whether there's been any updates in those files, right? So you can run those prompts and it will run a weekly scheduled lint, making sure that all your connections, all your knowledge base are in shape. Now, I understand that took a little while and it's a little troublesome, but trust me, that's going to be super helpful in the long run when building out your persistent memory, your knowledge base, so that when you ask Claude to come up with the prospecting list and the sequences and messages, it's going to be able to give you the most effective outcome instead of not knowing certain context that it should know about your company. So now I'm going to fire off the first prompt, which is find the top 10 accounts and contacts that I should reach out to in the Bay Area to pitch Ledgerly. Use Lemlist for enrichment and come up with personalized sequences directly on Lemlist. Share the link to the campaigns here. So I'm asking it to come up with the top 10 accounts and the contacts that I should reach out to. So it should know whether my ICPs are CFOs or are they accounting managers or financial controllers. And then I want it to create not just the copywriting of the emails, but also for LinkedIn, but then also sequence that, wire that up inside of Lemlist, so that I can immediately just fire it off if I want to, right? If I want to run the campaign, it's just one click on Lemlist and that's it. And in fact, you can even fire it off from Claude Cowork if I wanted to, but of course I want human in the loop just to review. So I'm gonna fire this off and see what it comes back with. Okay, so it's coming back with a couple of verification questions, which is great. Who should the 10 contacts be? Ledgerly's playbook says CFO plus controller to ask more often. So I would say both CFO and controller. How should I set up Lemlist campaigns? See, it's asking me whether I should launch it directly. So no, I don't want it to launch directly. So I could go, let's say one campaign, leave and draft. How aggressively should I filter the account list? Let's say broader mid-market, right? Let's say I'm not too strict about the ICPs just yet. Yeah, so as it's working through that and coming up with the 10 contacts and also the messaging for those 10 contacts, I realized I forgot to talk about what's left here on the left-hand corner, which is artifacts, schedule, dispatch, customize. We talked about that already. So artifacts is essentially anything that you've created, right? Like HTMLs and stuff like that. And you don't really need to bother too much about artifacts just yet because it just automatically comes under, whatever task that you're asking it to do. It creates it and actually will output it in your window without you having to go into artifacts. And then schedule is basically any task that you've asked Claude Cowork to schedule, and you can easily do that by just asking it in plain English, hey, schedule this particular task at 9 a.m. every Monday, let's say, right? Dispatch is essentially how you can communicate with Cowork and code remotely through your phone. So I don't use this too much just yet, but it is something that just allows you to use more Claude, even if you're not right in front of your computer. But feel free to play around with it, see if it fits the way you work, and customize essentially what we've covered before, Skills Connectors plugins. There are a couple of settings here that you can play around with, but I'm going to skip that for now because that's not particularly too interesting. So let's get back to the project and the task. And again, I'm glad I'm coming back to this because it's asking me for a bunch of permissions on Lemlist to do certain tasks on Lemlist. So I'm just going to click Always Allow. The first time you use any other third-party tools, typically it's going to wait for your permission to allow certain actions to be done with that tool. So probably interesting to note that it actually knows that my ICP is 200 to 2,000 employees. So, companies that are not too big, but not too small, mid-market. So NetSuite, Sage, Intact, controller in Champion, 90% of deals, CFO is the economic buyer. So it knows all of this, not because it hallucinated it, right? It knows all of this because we've built a pretty robust knowledge base, even though these are all fictitious data. So I'm sure it's going to be even more robust when you're an actual running a business. I'm going to just allow this and be able to just give you better quality at the end of the day. So what we did earlier, even though it takes a long time and it's pretty boring, just all the setup, this is where it's going to make an impact. This is where it's going to come in handy. And you'll be glad that you did it because now you don't actually have to tell it so many stuff, right? Because now you can just go into your knowledge base and be able to sequence effective campaigns to the right people. Okay, so it's coming back with the results now. So essentially, it's come up with 10 accounts with 18 contacts in total. And these are CFOs, controllers, my personas, and it's telling me the sequences, which is email 1, says most CFO companies, 30 days to close. Okay, so I think it's easier to actually look at this on Lemlist. And in fact, it actually gave me the link here. So I'm just going to open that link and go to campaigns. I don't know why that link is not the right link, but if you go to campaigns, you'll see that there is a campaign created. So right now there are error on senders because this is a dummy account from my end. I have not bought any inboxes yet. So as you can see, I need to connect my email provider, but I'm not going to do that because I think the whole point of this is essentially just to show you what the copywriting looks like. So for example, here, most CFOs of the companies, and don't worry about this, curly braces company name. This is going to be replaced with the actual company name and the first name. And these are just some logical things that get baked in, right? So pumping this up. So this is just a follow-up email. Part of the process that I looked at was that it wasn't able to sequence any LinkedIn multi-channel outreach. The reason being, I'm on a plan in this dummy account, which is the lowest tier, and it's not able to actually do a LinkedIn outreach. So what you can do is actually just to subscribe to a higher plan, which is in this case a multi-channel plan. So I'm currently on just the email plan. But yeah, I forgot that I was not subscribed on this particular account for the multi-channel. You have LinkedIn automation, SMS, So that's how, kind of everything comes together. And of course, if I were to connect my email provider, I don't want to connect anything right now because this is connected to my personal account, but you can easily connect them. Essentially just launched it as the next step. And if you have multiple emails, right? So I mentioned that with Lemlist, you can actually buy more emails. So when you have that, it will actually auto-rotate between those 2, 3, 4 emails, depending on how many you have. So yeah, you can actually launch a campaign at scale with a tool like Lemlist. Again, I'm not going to go too deeply into how Lemlist all works unless you guys are interested in that. I'll make another video specifically for it because it is quite a vast topic on its own. But I'm trying to show is that if you already have a tool that does the same thing, it's very likely that you're going to have the same existing MCP connection to Claude that you can use in order to automate all these things for you, from essentially crafting the campaigns, coming up with a list of people to contact, and actually launching the campaign. So cool, that's the prospecting bit. So the next thing that we want to automate here is really the pre-call research and prep. So what is pre-call research and prep? Well, what it needs to do is Claude needs to go over to your calendar, right? So check calendar for upcoming calls. So this is sales calls, right? And so you need to connect that to your calendar. And after checking that, do a prospect research, right? So this is the research, anything that's occurred between prospecting to them wanting to talk to you right now, and as well as research on that person that you're meeting, right? Like on LinkedIn, whether he or she has a YouTube channel, whether he or she has any other projects that they're working on, maybe even up to their personal lives that you can drop in as part of the conversation, right? So after they do prospect research, what you're gonna do is for Claude to give you the brief meeting prep brief, right? Okay, so in order to do all of this first, obviously you want to connect your calendar, right? So here I'm going to go to connectors again. I don't think I have my connectors or calendar connected. So I'm going to go to browse connectors. So my calendar is on Google. So that's Google Calendar. I'm going to hit connect and it's going to ask me to authenticate, right? So I'm going to hit continue, hit select all and continue. And yeah, just hit open Claude and there you go. Your calendar is connected. Now, because this is a separate task, what I want to do is go back to the project level and actually prompt it as a separate task and not the same task as the outreach one. Now, the reason why we're going to do that is because every single session has a context window, right? So the more crowded the context window, the worse the performance of the LLM is. So what you want to do is if something is almost entirely separate in terms of context from the previous task, run it as a new task within the same project. The reason why we're going to run it in the same project is because we want Claude to have access to the folders or the knowledge base that we built, remember, with Obsidian and all that. So in this case, I want to say, help me prep for my call with Ying Hui, which is a dummy prospect, and give me a brief on how I should pitch Ledgerly. Or let's say I do that, right? And then I'm going to invoke call prep skill. And the reason, again, this is from the sales plugin that we downloaded. And the reason why I want to invoke that skill because it has a pretty good guideline of what are the best practices in prepping calls. Now, if you look at my calendar, again, this is my personal calendar, so I didn't fill it with anything, but I have an upcoming meeting. Again, this is not a real meeting, but I have an upcoming meeting with Ying Hui, which is the prospect here. And essentially, I wanted to prepare me for my meeting for that call, assuming it's a sales call for Ledgerly, right? Okay, so we're going to run that and see if it's able to fetch calendar, understand the person that I'm meeting with, like just from the email. So what I expect it to do is actually go to the internet, search who this person is, what it's doing, etc., and also search the CRM to see if there were past conversations and stuff like that, which is what it's exactly doing, right? Like your calendar CRM, call transcripts, Ledgerly knowledge base to see if there's such clients and any other prior communications that have been had with this particular prospect. So that's what you want to do, right, for any prep in terms of getting into a discovery call, into a sales call. So yep, it's correctly using the calendar and it found 5 to 6 p.m. Bangkok time meeting with Ying Hui, which has nothing on HubSpot currently. And I was going out and checking to the internet to see who Ying Hui is and how I could better pitch Ledgerly. All right, so it's coming back to the results now. This is the document, the brief that I've asked call prep with Tan Ying Hui today. And your goals qualify, fit, land, free starter tier if there's a real spend, expense, pain. The one thing you should know before you dial, this is almost certainly below your ICP. Yeah, so this is not actually my ICP, small play. It's not a pitch. Yeah, because this is a very early stage startup, but it's still coming up with how to pitch Ledgerly here. One place for your cards, expense receipts, so not reconciling spreadsheet month end to end. All right, lead with the starter corporate cards, suggested agenda, discovery questions. All right, so obviously, this is a dummy ICP. It's something that I just picked randomly. But what I want to do here is to introduce a concept of multi-agent orchestration. So let me try to explain the concept of sub-agent in this case, right? So you probably heard of, multi-agent orchestration, sub-agents, kind of the buzzwords floating around. A lot of people obviously use it in Claude Code, but to a certain extent, not a lot of people know that actually you can do it in Cowork as well, right? Sometimes on some random runs on a complex enough task, it will actually spin up its own multi-agent orchestration without you even prompting it. But what it is essentially is you have obviously the current session that you're running in Claude, like for example, this what we call the main agent, because that's the main session that you're running it. The main agent doesn't mean it's more intelligent or more superior. It's just the original agent that's running your original session. So let's call this the main agent, right? So now there are a few methodologies of running sub-agent, right? So you can run, for example, one of the popular ones is the fan out and then synthesizing agent. And what it's very good for is essentially be able to go out and have a swarm of agents do research instead of just one agent going through the research. So I'm just going to put 3 sub-agents over here and call this sub-agent and this sub-agent 2, sub-agent 3, right? So what it does is the main agent will fan out to these smaller sub-agents And I called it small because typically you would use, a lesson model, right? Again, you don't have to. If you do use a lesson model, then it becomes the fact that the main agent is somewhat more intelligent than the sub agent. But for example, for the main agent, you might be using what we're using now is Opus 4.8, right? And you can use Fable, whatever. But for the sub agent, you can actually specify. If you don't specify, they might usually use Opus 4.8 again. But you might actually specify, let's say Sonnet or Haiku or whatnot, right? So you can do that. And the reason why we want to do this is because obviously we want to save tokens, right? If the tasks that are undertaken by the sub-agents are a lot simpler, then you might want to use a simpler model. Now, where would this kind of approach be beneficial for us, right? So for example, if you're trying to do research, so I want Claude to go out to the internet to do research and basically synthesize all the findings into one main agent to tell me what's the result of things, right? Because the internet is so broad, you want different kind of agents searching for different areas, different topics and stuff like that. It may be relevant to what you want to do. So here, this might go back to not a main agent, but a synthesizer agent. Or you could go back also to the main agent by just telling it a compilation of the report, right? So this is what some people call the fan out, fan in synthesizer agents. And there are a couple of other methods as well. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I think the popular ones are the fan out and synthesize. And then the other one would be to have the state consensus. People have multi-agents debating on whether a specific solution is good, and you have a devil's advocate agent or adversarial agent to kind of give a counterpoint. So just to make sure you comprehensively cover a specific line of thought. So you may be asking, since agents are basically clones of the main agents, and even if, let's say, if I were to use Opus 4.8, it's exactly the same as my main agent in terms of what it can do capability-wise. Why are we trying to do this, right? Well, the reason being, for every agent or every session, there is a context window, right? So imagine this is your context window over here, right? This is the bar for the context window. And the more information exists in that context window, the more it uses up not drawing within the lines here, it uses up more of the bars here, right? So let's say you use up all the way to this bar, okay? To this point. I'm really doing a bad job at this. So you have this much context window and you can continue using it. So for example, if I already chatted with the main agent about all the other stuff and I say, okay, now go out and do research on this particular topic. So this is, let's say I was just discussing, right? Whoop. And then this is research. It's going to use up the context window just to do this research, and at some point it's going to be forced to compact the entire context window. So what we want to do is, instead of using up the context window, and remember, the more context window is using, the lesser the performance of the session. And so the fundamental reason why we want to split out the task to sub-agents is to conserve context window, right? So now this research portion is going to be split out to sub-agent 1, 2, and 3, and then it's just going to come back with the findings instead of having the same agent go out into the internet and find things sequentially. And of course, there are other reasons as well, like parallelization. You may have multiple agents like this that's doing parallel work, right? Let's say I want this particular agent to do research on view A, right? Or, just to A/B test even, or to maybe have a debate on the data, right? Let's say research on view B. So this is all parallel instead of sequential. So in the traditional sense, if you're just using one agent, you might do a research on view A and then do another research on view B and then reconcile that, with another agent, right? But here you can run concurrent researches. But again, it's not just researches. Any task that fundamentally can run in parallel, you can actually save time by having a multi-agent team instead of just one agent doing it. So mainly that's the reason why we want to use sub-agents. It is more complex. It takes a lot more tokens, of course, as we're spinning up these sub-agents. So for most tasks, you might actually not need it, but it's good to know, keep at the back of your pocket if you really need some deep research done, or if there's a sufficiently complex enough process that you want to spin up a fleet of sub-agents for. You can actually do that from the terminal itself, right? So here, obviously this is not the right case to use this, but I just want to show how you can apply this in a simple task, like just prepping for your meeting. So here I'm specifying, can you now run a multi-agent fan out and synthesize method? Oh, okay, misspelled this. To research Yinghui and Ying's Creative Lab, and come back, which is Ying's Creative Lab is the company's name, come back with a more robust findings, use Sonnet or Haiku for the research agent. Again, I'm just telling this in natural language, in English, to Claude, and it knows what I want to do, right? It knows that I want it to run a multi-agent fan out and synthesize as a method that I've chosen. And there you go. We would call our fan out 4 Sonnet research agents in different angles and synthesize updated finding, right? So here you start seeing that it's calling 2 sub-agents and it's going to run that. So it's actually spun up 4 agents in total to research identity background. Some of it are researching the business, location and market, footprint and buying. So as you can see, it covers a lot broader angle than what it did previously when it's doing the research, because it's just running on one agent in one session, right? So this is now branching out to 4, and then later on being centralized into one by a synthesizer agent. So it allows Claude to go to Instagram, yes, allow. So as you can see, it does consume quite a bit of tokens. We're talking multi-steps across 4 different agents. And in certain cases, it might spin up 5, 6, even 10 sub-agents, depending on the complexity of the task that you're asking it to do. So one of the useful application of this is actually if, let's say, you're trying to find a very tight, very strict ICP list that you want to reach out and contact to, and you want to check that, they are still working in a company, they are related to maybe their influences or gatekeepers in the mix that you want to research about, that will be a very good application of a fan-out and synthesizer agent orchestration method to apply to. So something like what we did earlier with the prospecting list, that probably would fit that better. Of course, it's going to take a lot more tokens, but yeah, I just want to run a simple one so you guys get a good understanding of how it all works. And then you can really just play around with it and apply it to your use case and see if it actually improves the results, right? All right, so it finally completed the task, and here's the new findings. So it has a lot more information about Ying's Creative Lab, pricing, etc., where she's based in. Of course, she's on the right ICP for Ledgerly. It's even suggested an agenda that, hey, open honestly, setting up a good tone. And yeah, a lot more information that came with it. Ying's Creative Lab is a Singapore-based brand web designer. Yeah, cool. So just wanted to show you guys the comparison between before and after using the multi-agent orchestration method. In this case, the fan-out synthesizer. And so you can see the information that's been given out is a lot more robust, a lot more granular than previously. All right, so coming back to the process here. So let me move this out a little bit over here. Okay, so the next is decks and proposals. So one of the things that I've seen sales reps struggle with, even RevOps, right, with supporting them with collaterals, is coming up with personalized proposals that look good on brand to a specific client. So in the past, we used to have graphic designers do this for us, presentation designers, just to get things on brand. And all of that now can be solved with Claude Design. Right now, you can actually invoke Claude Design directly from Claude Desktop. So what you can do is go to the bottom left-hand corner and you see Design over here. Once you click Claude Design, what's going to happen is it's going to pop up a fresh new window as part of Claude Desktop. And what it is, as you can see, this is a pretty much prompt and design interface. And to me, the biggest value that it has is the fact that it has the design system. So right now, I have a Ledgerly design system already created. But if you don't have a design system just yet, design system basically is just a brand guideline that Claude will follow when it's coming up with the design. So if you don't already have a design system, you can hit the plus button and basically add a design system here. And you could do either create here, if you already have a Figma or a GitHub link, you can just paste it on there, or you can create using Claude Code. Typically, if you're already a running business, you have your brand guidelines, whatnot. So I would choose create here. And you can name your company, right? So in this case, it's Ledgerly. I've already created one, but what you can do, if you have a Figma file, you can upload it over here. If you have just project, a folder with, logos, brands, and stuff like that, you can drag the folder and put it over here. So for me, what I did was there is this brand folder under my Ledgerly directory, which again was organized previously with our Wiki LLM structure. And what I do is I'm just going to drag this brand and just put it over here. So once I drop that in, what I can do is just hit continue to generation here. It'll say it'll take about 5 minutes to generate your design system, and I'm going to hit generate, right? So it's creating the design system. And instead of just waiting here, I'm going to show you what exactly the result is from uploading that whole chunk of logos, folders, and stuff like that. Just for reference, the actual files contains logos, guidelines, applications. So stuff that you normally would have, but maybe a bit more disorganized, just drop it all in there and it's going to just work it out for you. So once you have that design system created, it will show up here as Ledgerly design system, let's say. And then what I want to do now is actually tell it what to create. And earlier, I've already gone back to Claude to ask it to create the content for a proposal deck, 10 slides to pitch Ledgerly to a typical client personas that I can paste directly into Claude Design. You can come up with a fictitious code, again, because this is a fictitious company. So what essentially I'm trying to ask Claude to do is I'm asking it to create just the outline, right? I don't want the entire PowerPoint being created over here. Because if I were to just ask it to create a proposal deck, which you can, it's going to give you a very typical, very generic type of proposal decks that is not on brand because it's not very good at deciphering what kind of color code you need and where the logos go in and stuff like that, which is what Claude Design is built for. So what I wanted to do is just create the content, just the content that I could pay directly onto Claude Design to create what I want. So essentially, I can just copy all of this and just go back to Claude Design, right, and just paste it over here. Remember to select the correct design system, Ledgerly design system here, and well, let's use Fable 5 for now because it just came out today. So let's see how it does with Claude Design actually. So let's give it a while and see what it comes back with. Okay, so it's still working, but it's coming up with the slides now. So as you can see, there's a good gradient over here. Of course, this is based on whatever that I've uploaded or whatever Claude has created in the fictitious brand guidelines. So some of these are kind of blank because they don't really have the logos just yet. Again, because these are all fictitious and dummies. So if you already have a running business, you should have all these logos, all these photos that you need. And it's just going to give you this on-brand, aesthetically high-quality assets, which is tough to achieve in the past, where you have to work with presentation design to be able to actually put something like this together. But now you can do it in less than 5 minutes. And I'm not going to spend too much time on Claude Design, but there are a couple of neat things that you can do over here. Like, for example, you can do some comments on a specific function, right? So that is the good part about Claude Design is you don't have to type here and describe what you want to change. You can actually say, hey, I want this to be red, all right, for example, and add comment, okay. Adding comment doesn't send it directly to Claude because I can add multiple comments, right? I can say add a box here, let's say, okay, and then I'll send both to Claude now. And sorry, this one resolve with Claude. Okay, so right now it's working that on those two comments, which is add a box here, and I want this to be red. And you'll see in a minute that it will only change that particular part, okay? So it's changed this to red, and now it's working on the box. Let me just refresh that. Okay, yeah, so it did catch the red, it didn't catch the box for some reason. But what you can do is actually do a markup as well, right? If that's, to your style, you can just draw the box like this and add the note at this box, okay? And then it should be able to catch that now. All right, there we go. It added the box and turned that to red. So this is just to let you guys know that it solves the issue of wanting to change certain things and not wanting to change the other. And here you can be very specific with marking up what you want to change and commenting. Okay, cool. So that's the proposal deck that you can personalize to your clients. So next, what we're going to do is call scripts. Oh, I realized I didn't explain the decks and proposals thing, but because I think it's pretty straightforward, right? You just need a design tool to put together the proposals that you want. Well, before that, you need the content generation tool of what you want to put inside your pitch deck, and you can use Claude to do that, right? So we actually just write it out. So what we did was Claude for content, and then Claude Design for decks. Okay, so last but not least, the two call scripts and coaching. So I'm going to do the CRM hygiene first. So CRM hygiene, what do we want to do here, right? So in this case, I'm going to just take one use case, which is reporting. So it's very vast. You can do a lot of things with your CRM once connected, and I'm connecting mine to HubSpot. So, but what you can do is once you do that, the big one is pull data, and then afterwards, reporting, right? So report decks, for example, okay? So this is what we want to do. We want Claude to pull the data from, in my case, is CRM, which is HubSpot. And then it will generate the reporting decks to me to let me know what is the state of the union with B2B and, also projections and stuff like that. Okay, so in this case, just to save time, I actually ran it before. I'm giving it a simple, give me a full report of the health of our pipelines on HubSpot using /pipeline review. And so this is one of the skills that's part of the sales plugin for the past 90 days with revenue numbers. I missed that. Right. So the output of all of that is this report right here. And again, this report doesn't have to be in presentation format. It can be in Word document if you like. It can be sheets. It can be HTML page that is more interactive. So you pick kind of your preference around this, but essentially it gives you a full pipeline report of how much revenue is booked, what's the open pipeline, what's the weighted pipeline, what's needing attention and stuff like that. Revenue book in the last 90 days. And because I'm pulling this from existing HubSpot, I have to black up some of the deals here and open pipeline snapshot, qualification, sales, expansion, etc. So yeah, it gives you coverage region by owner, risk flags, deals, right? So it gives you some recommended actions as well. Of course, you can further improve this. Like I said, this is one of those complex tasks that you could definitely use a multi-agent orchestration method, maybe fan out or maybe stochastic, depending on what you want to do. But definitely worth looking into in terms of pulling CRM reports. As I shown, my simple prompt was literally a one-liner, which is not a good prompt. So what you want to do is also to come up with a better prompt and include whatever you want to include or you want to focus on over here. And before I forget, I actually went one step ahead. I didn't show you guys how to connect it to HubSpot, right? But it's essentially the same thing. Go to Customize, go to Connectors, and hit the plus sign. Use Browse Connectors. And here, just type in HubSpot. HubSpot is one of the official connectors, and Salesloft is too. So yeah, whatever CRM that you're using, you should be able to find a connection here. And of course, apart from reporting, you can run CRM hygiene checks, ask it to go into your CRM and do some actions to keep some of the deals clean, tight. Those used to take a lot of manual hours, now can be done pretty easily through Claude. Last but not least, call script and coaching. So in this case, with call scripts, you need some form of format to pull the transcript from, right? And in this case, I'm using a tool called Fireflies, and it's a pretty neat meeting recording tool. If you guys haven't used it, you can check it out. Essentially, record the meeting, has a transcript, so it's easy for Claude to go in there and actually analyze how the call works and everything. So it pulls the transcripts, and then what you want Claude to do is basically have that analyze. So Claude analyze and provide coaching, right? So if you're a sales manager, for example, this is very useful because every day, if you have 5 reps making 10 calls, you're not possibly going to be able to go through each and every one of them. And what you can do, have Claude go through all those 10 calls and give you play-by-play on what's going on, what can be improved, what are the red flags to highlight, what are the green flags to give credits to, and essentially automate maybe 80% of your coaching. What we do is sometimes we even have Claude send these findings directly to the sales reps themselves so they can self-improve. But of course, the human touch is simply irreplaceable, especially when it comes to coaching, and especially when it comes to closing deals and stuff like that, which is a very human-centric thing to do. So the whole idea is not to automate 100% of the things when it comes to sales, but to automate 80 to 90% of all the grunt work, and so that you can focus on the 10 to 20% that requires humans to accomplish, such as closing the deal, right? And also actually selling and talking to people. My opinion is that humans will always want to buy from humans. Everything else can be automated away, but having that human connection, talking to the person, understanding the product through the person, having that person to reach out to, that's irreplaceable, and that's going to continue to be so. So how you would do this is, again, you want to connect first the connectors, right, to Fireflies. And again, it doesn't have to be Fireflies. It could be any other meeting note takers that you're using. But here, in this case, I'm using Firefly. So I'm going to go to connectors, and again, browse connectors. Fireflies has one of the official connectors, so you can just click on that. And again, same thing, the browser will pop up, ask for authentication. Remember to use the same email address as what you've registered on Fireflies, and you're good to go. And once you're connected, what you can actually do is you can just simply ask it to run a review on this particular sales calls. And I got this link from Fireflies, and I use this B2B sales coaching skills, which I've created myself based on, how the company works and stuff like that. But even if you don't have this link, what you can do is you can review any sales calls that's happening every day, daily, and you can schedule it, right? And so it will review not just one sales call, but multiple sales calls that happen within the day. But I'm just trying to be proficient with token here in this demo. So I'm picking one particular link from Fireflies that will give you an idea on how the sales call reviews will go. So here is giving the score of the calls that happen, opening framing, discovery, business values, 5.9 out of 10, not too good for this particular one. Maybe caught the sales rep on a bad day. This is a discovery demo, trial booked. And then there are a couple of findings as well, areas to improve. So I had to blur out a couple of things because obviously this is an ongoing deal and I can't disclose some of the company names and stuff like that. But just wanted to let you know how this could potentially turn out. Again, this is based on the guidelines that I've given based on the skills, the B2B sales coaching skills. You can create your own skills based on your preference on how you want to coach your team. But overall, what I'm trying to say is that once you create this framework, you can automate the entire analysis and coaching directly from Claude Cowork. And you can schedule all of this, right? So you can schedule all of this by just saying, schedule a call review task for any sales calls that happen. And then I wanted to use the coaching, the B2B sales coaching skills, and use calendar and Fireflies for the transcript. So just like that, a very simple prompt, which will then schedule it as a recurring task every day at 9 a.m. So now it's asking me for permission to schedule a task at 9 a.m. And there you go, now done. A daily 9 a.m. review is scheduled. And where you can view this is under schedule. You can say the daily sales call review, and you can open that up. And you can run now if you like, or you can toggle it off if you don't want it to run, right? I'm going to toggle this off right now. So that's it. You practically have already automated the sales review flow on this daily 9 a.m. session, where it's going to give you all the briefs of the sales calls that happened in the past 24 hours. So that's it. I hope that was a useful tutorial. At least it should get you to the point where you're very conversant or familiar with how to use Claude Cowork in many aspects of B2B sales or sales in general. Again, all the tools that I've used in this video, I'll link it down in the description below if you're interested. You don't have to use these tools. If you already have a version of those tools, the data enrichment platform, the meeting recorder, note taker, calendars, any type of CRMs, any type of tools that you're already using, is likely that you can connect it directly with Claude. So you don't actually have to switch tools unless you find value in doing so, right? This is just to show you how these tools come together with Claude Cowork to be able to automate all these pieces of sales process and for it to come together and work just like a team. And also for you to understand some basic foundational concepts of Claude Cowork and also the multi-agent orchestration, what are the different methods and what are the pros and cons of using them, as well as Claude Design, and most importantly, how to set up your knowledge base effectively with the Wiki LLM method, just organizing your directory indexes and making sure that those index is included as part of the Claude.md or index.md, which is also linked to Claude.md, so that every time that particular project or cowork sessions load up, it will actually immediately know the index and directory of the knowledge base, so it's easy for it to gain context to your company, brand, product, and services. If you find videos like these useful, please consider subscribing and hit that thumbs up button. It really does help a lot. And let me know if you'd like me to go into a more advanced build of Claude Cowork for sales, or even Claude Code for sales, or marketing for that matter, or any other functions of the business. I would love to deep dive into each of these business functions to see how businesses could leverage Claude in their teams in the most practical way. All right, so that's it for now, and I'll see you on the next one.